This show is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Without a healthy mind, being happy is hard. Visit betterhelp.com/kindafunny and see if online therapy is for you. What's up, and welcome back to the Kinda Funny Gamescast. As always, I am Tim Geddes, joined by the new face of video games, Blessing Adeoye Jr.
Wu-Tang ain't nothing to mess with.
Hey, that's true. That is the truth. Isn't that right? One of the coolest dudes in video games, Greg Miller.
I remember at a San Diego Comic-Con party hearing it that IGN ain't nothing to fuck with. Were you not at that party, Tim?
Who said that? Was that Per Schneider?
No, it was one of the Wu-Tang members.
Okay. Oh, okay. I don't remember the specific story you're talking about. I remember when they were at the party.
Yeah, when they came on stage, it was like the most weird fucking thing of all time. They came on at this IGN after party at Comic-Con, and God, who was it?
With the Cirque du Soleil happening?
Probably, I don't know. All the IGN Comic-Con parties run together. Blessing, Wu-Tang members, go.
Ghostface Killer, RZA.
Redman.
I think it was Redman. It was Redman, right? I think I don't know Wu-Tang super well, but he came out, yeah, and he started with the Wu-Tang Clan ain't nothing to fuck with, and then he changed it to IGN ain't nothing to fuck with, and it was that weird thing of us all looking around like this is insane. This is awesome. This is insane.
Somebody record this. Somebody catalog
you said this is. Did Per Schneider say that? Yes, Per Schneider infamously on a Nintendo voice chat declared IGN ain't nothing to fuck with.
The first E3 I ever went to was the year they were promoting Def Jam Rap Star.
Oh, sure.
Remember that? It was like the Karaoke Revolution type title, but for rap.
Yeah, I never played it, but I feel like I'd be really good at it.
And Method Man and Redman were performing on this like tiny little embarrassing stage at a booth in E3. Like it was not a stage, it was a step. It was one step, and they were like this far from me, and I was like, everything about this is making me feel awkward. Isn't that right? The voice of the faceless, Andy Cortez.
Yes, hello.
Andy, why don't you show your beautiful face?
I'm not feeling optimal right now.
Sure, fair enough.
I'm good. I'm good enough to talk and slap it up with y'all fools.
Are you laying in bed right now?
No, I'm at my desk. I have my good microphone. Can't you tell my cord isn't that long? I'm not like Kevin leaning back at a 90-degree angle. But I wanted to turn my lights off, and we played Kana on stream, and I was getting really intense I was playing on hard mode. It was too much that I could do. So yeah.
This sounds like when I was playing Valorant. This sounds like the time I was playing Valorant with you guys and I had a hangover, but I was like, oh, it's not that bad. And then over the course of the stream, it got that bad. And I was just like, somebody kill me. I need to get to the end of the stream. I need to get to the end of the stream, and I got to text him and tell him I cannot be on Kinda Funny podcast.
That's why you all love us here at Kinda Funny. You can go to youtube.com/kindafunnygames to watch this beautiful show, the Kinda Funny Gamescast, each and every week. Or if podcasts are more your thing, use your favorite podcast service and search for Kinda Funny Gamescast. I'll be real with everyone. I'm having an off day. I can't get any words out, so I appreciate everyone's patience. Thank you all. You can go to roosterteeth.com if you want a different option for video stuff. If you want to watch the show live as we record it, if you want the exclusive post show, you can go to patreon.com/kindafunnygames. Just like our Patreon producers, Tyler Ross, the Kinda Funny Destiny 2 PC clan, Julian, the gluten-free gamer, Alex, Jay Sandoval, Techie Haas, James Hastings, Casey Andrew, Elliot, and Brian Ward did. A whole bunch of new names in there. Thank you all so very much for your support. And if you guys don't have any bucks to toss our way, but you're out there buying up video games, guess what? We now have an epic creator code. Our creator code is Kinda Funny. No spaces. Boom. Right there. Thank you, Bear, for bringing up the fun little video. You can use the code for any in-game purchases for the Epic Games. So that's Rocket League, that's Fall Guys, that's Fortnite, or any game you're buying on the Epic Games Store, and it'll support us. So money you're giving them, some of it goes to us. No extra purchase for you. So that's great. Epic creator code, Kinda Funny. Moving on from that, you guys know what this show is, and that's why we appreciate it very much. I want to get right into the first game we want to talk about, because usually there'll be preview events, there'll be reviews. Some of us are playing, and I get to ask people questions. I get to find out what they thought before. I get a little preview of the preview content that we're about to do on the podcast. We're about to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy, and I have not been able to talk to Greg at all about this, so I have no idea where his head's at. Greg Miller, I want you to tell me all about it.
Oh,
Marvel's Guardians of the... I gotta to make sure there was nothing on the back screen. Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. Let's talk about it. Yeah, I got to do a preview of it, play quite a bit of it. I forget at this point, actually, because it was a couple weeks ago if I played. I'm going to say an hour and a half. That sounds about right. Maybe it was just an hour. I forget. But I played a healthy chunk of the game. One big old mission there in the game. Now, I want to give the preamble before we get in here, of course. Tim, you've seen Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. You haven't played it, but you saw it behind closed doors, correct?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
What were your impressions of Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy behind closed doors?
Overall, I was pretty impressed. I didn't love every single thing that I saw, but it definitely shot up to being one of the probably top 3 games I'm most excited for this year. Especially now that the Kane is out of the way, I would say that for the rest of the year, I'm looking at this. I'm looking at Metroid Dread, and I'm looking at Halo Infinite. So yeah, my hopes are pretty high. I think that the battle system looked really interesting, like a kind of fun mix between something a little more action oriented, like a Devil May Cry, but mixed with that Final Fantasy 15, Final Fantasy 7 remake type of working with partners, working with team type elements that I love so much.
And I think one of the things you had talked about, right, is like, you don't expect this to be a 10. You were thinking, what? It's like, swimming in 7s, maybe an 8, somewhere in there. It's going to be fun to play kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Andy Cortez, the Nitro Rifle himself. Clear your mind.
Okay.
And give me the quote you think of from this person when I tell you their name, all right? Denny Green.
They are who we thought they were.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, that sums up Guardians of the Galaxy. I think, Tim, you have a really great read on what this game is. Throughout my play session with it, I went through a range of emotions where I think you start and you jump in, and I was like, we know the Guardians so well from MCU and review, obviously, watching these movies, seeing them throughout their 2 movies, Endgame and Into the Avengers, right? Stuff like that, let alone if you've read the comics and done all that stuff. So to jump in here to a game that is so obviously influenced by the movies, there is that, for me personally, knee-jerk reaction of, ooh, Peter Quill, all right, like, I don't like your hair and I don't really like your vibe. Okay, cool.
Fuck you, Greg.
What?
He has the coolest hair I've ever seen.
Listen, it's just because it's your hair. Just because it's your hair doesn't mean you think it's
your shape. It's blonde like your hair.
It's blonde like your hair. Yeah. Big time blonde.
My hair can't be that straight. I wish it was. I want to just have that Pidgeotto look, man. Oh.
Same thing with Drax and Gamora and, Rocket's not Bradley Cooper and all this stuff. And I think in the same way, so many people had that adverse reaction to the first time we saw the Avengers in Marvel's Avengers trailer, right? Of like, oh man, these guys look like they got Spirit Halloween costumes. Spirit Halloween, of course, a great company, a great costume. I know it is King of Halloween. I started playing this and had that, but then got to ease into it a bit. Ship, right? We're on the Milano.
Hold on, hold on a second.
Everything just froze.
Yeah, everything. Discord was on one for a second. I think
too damn hot today.
Yeah. So just like the last 10 seconds, whatever you were saying.
Sure. So, I mean, as I said, it was a slow burn to get me up to speed with the characters, get me ingratiated with that world, right? You start on the Milano. This is a controlled demo. It was not the beginning of the game. It wasn't from the start of the game on. It was already established that stuff had happened. We had gotten, videos to watch beforehand since this was a parsec demo, which means, of course, I'm playing it remotely. We had seen some videos and presentations beforehand, kind of setting up where we were in the story. And you walk around the Milano and you talk to all the characters, and for me, that's when the game started to put its hooks into me of what it was going to be, of actually having those conversations. There's a cutscene, where we're interacting. There's this argument basically over what we should do next. We've been fined by the Nova Corps. Do we want to run from it? Do we want to go pay the fine? How do you want to have this play out? Who do you agree with? As I think it was Gamora and Drax maybe laid out different, or Gamora and Rocket laid out different plans, right? And obviously, as we're watching, an old demo here from E3, I believe, we've seen that before where, okay, cool. The idea here is that you play as Peter Quill. You play as Star-Lord. You do not play as the other Guardians. But as Peter Quill, you play as the leader of the Guardians, which gives you command in a way over him. So I wasn't personally expecting the spaceship Milano stuff, because after we get through the cutscene and the conversations there, you can walk around and talk to all the different members of the Guardians of the Galaxy, right? And then, of course, Rocket, works at, it has a little workbench there that you can go to, and you can upgrade your stuff and spend your resources to make your weapon stronger, unlock new stuff like that. But you can just talk to them in general to get little bits from it. And, Nick Scarpino, Tim Geddes.
I have 2 questions about the Milano. One, what you're describing here sounds very similar to Jedi Fallen Order. Is it like that?
Yes, I was going to say like Mass Effect, but Jedi Fallen Order is an apt comparison as well. Yes, we walk around and have these conversations.
And then the second question that you can get to when it feels appropriate here. But in terms of the Milano, what excited me the most about the E3 footage that we saw this year it looked like Star Fox type control of the Milano. Did you get to do that?
I did not. I had forgotten all about that until they had sent over some B-roll here. And when I jumped through it, there was Milano actual gameplay of you flying and shooting. I was like, oh shit, I didn't even see that in my demo. I never got to be a part of that. So no, for this was just the calm before the storm in terms of action, walking around, getting to talk to them, getting to have those moments that I think make Guardians of the Galaxy, right? Where you get to have those personal moments. And, like I walked in on Gamora doing something she thinks is embarrassing. And so you have a conversation about that and you kind of get that back and forth and see the roles not reverse, but change a bit from just the gruff warrior that from outside in the cutscene already. And what obviously Gamora is established as already. And from there, it's going towards gameplay, and I'll get into all that. And you play through the thing and you go through and you feel the action, yada, yada, yada. The more I played, the more I liked Guardians of the Galaxy. The more I got into Guardians of the Galaxy. The one I think problematic critique I can give it is that a couple weeks ago I played Far Cry 6. And when I finished Far Cry 6 and walked away from Far Cry 6, I was like, I cannot wait for Far Cry 6. And it's been that thing of like all the time, like, oh man, checking the inbox, hoping somebody's messaging about it. Am I going to get a code soon? When I put down Guardians of the Galaxy and walked away from Guardians of the Galaxy, a game I enjoyed, a demo I enjoyed, I did not think about it again. And I feel like it's a bad thing in terms of if you're trying to make a 10 out of 10 video game. I don't think it's a bad thing in terms of what our expectations are. Back to the Denny Green conversation. They are who we thought they were. That this is a game that I think you're going to have fun with. I think it's not going to blow your doors off. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe when you're in there and you get everything in context and you're wrapped up in the world a little bit more, it will. But I don't think right now that it's going to be this game that's a 9 or is going to be a 10. Blessing Adeoye Jr. Future class video games.
Is the gameplay loop, is it what you see is what you get with it? Like, is there anything there that had you like, oh shit, this is different. Or, oh shit,
yes.
This is cool. Oh, I want to come back and do this again.
100%. That is 100% happening. I would think it kind of reminds me in a way, and everybody, I know I'm about to step into hollowed ground. I am not saying Guardians of the Galaxy is this game, but I'm hoping where I'm at with you right now of like, I'm kind of hoping it's a little bit similar to what my original Arkham Asylum reaction was. And if you ever heard this story on a Gamescast before, the first time they ever, I've grown up playing games and I'm working at IGN and I've reviewed a bunch of shit superhero games. Rocksteady showed up, WB showed up. They showed us Batman Arkham Asylum, and me and Anthony Gallegos left the demo room and walked to our desk and he goes, that looked pretty cool, right? And I'm like, I think so. Like there was a lot going on, and think about Arkham Asylum broken up and shown to you in a weird way where it was cool. Here's the controller, Greg. You can just hit this button over and over again. You punch. Just remember when to reverse. Okay. It's an action game. Okay, cool. Now we're jumping to a different point. You have to stay in the rafters. If you come down, they're going to shoot you and kill you. Oh fuck. What is this? This jumble of it. I felt like in a similar fashion for Guardians, we were thrown into the deep end. You can watch all the tutorial videos you want, right? To suddenly jump into combat and have not only control of Peter Quill, have control of, in terms of special actions, the 4 Guardians, have control of different power-ups, have control of different enemies that are coming. There was so much going on that I was talking to Simon Cardy from IGN, right? And we were trading war stories from our demos. And one of the things he said was like, yeah, and by the end of it, my thumb was pretty tired. And I was like, oh my God, thank you for saying something. I thought I was old. But it was this because there's so much going on that you're controlling Peter. I am old too. It's true, but it's not. It's accurate. But it is also the fact that it isn't just my thumbs breaking down. It is this idea that you are running around as Peter. You are shooting your gun as Peter. You have at this point in the game an ice ability for the gun that you're using there. But then on top of that, you're holding L1 and you're using your face buttons to then choose Drax. And then when you choose Drax opens up into another cross. So he's got at the time I think 2 options, but by the end of the game he'll have 4 options, right? So there's this battlefield management on top of being an active player in the battlefield that is more in depth than I was expecting. And I think being tossed into the deep end, by the end of the game, I was feeling more confident about what it was. I understood what everybody's moveset was in a different way. I think when you start the game from scratch and you get, I'm sure, drip fed each one of these characters, or at least each one of these abilities, and probably more tutorial rooms, you'll have a better chance at going in there and be like, okay, I know in this situation, Rocket can do this. Okay, Groot should be doing this. This is how I can team them up. Because then it was on top of all that stuff, Groot, I command to grab a guy. He grabs the guy. He holds him up. And then on top of that, there's like a triangle or whatever it was to then have them shoot this and do this. Like, oh my God, there's so much going on in this, which I like. I felt again deep end. You're trying to figure it all out and not look like an idiot when you're playing the game and understand what's going on. But I think that could be the turning point for me of like making it even more enjoyable. But to your point, Bless, you go to the Milano, right? You do this mission. What the choice was is that we're going to go to the Nova Corps. We're going to pay the fine. When you land at the Nova Corps base, you get this one more thing as you walk, very Mass Effect like, to the door to go down. All the other Guardians are standing there, so you can talk to them one by one and see where they're at, right? And I was able to, and I'm not sure how much of it actually did, right? Like Rocket was more angry with me coming out of the last cutscene, but talking to him, which was optional beforehand, and then talking to him again here, it seemed like I calmed him down and got him back more to center. Not maybe agreeing with me on my decision, but understanding it, not being pissed at me about it. Then you come off the ship, you walk into the Nova Corps area where you're going to pay the fine. None of the Nova Corps is there, right? So now it suddenly becomes this, it goes from being this, talking game on the Milano to now being, we're wandering around and it's puzzle solving, which, we've kind of seen in some of the demos before, but it was this idea of like, okay, cool. Over there on the other side of this glass is a panel we need Rocket to work on, right? Rocket is going to do it for me, but I have to find the access point for him. I find the access point. I tell Rocket to go through it. Again, I'm not doing it as Rocket. Rocket goes through and he sends energy, and suddenly I'm into, a tried and true video game reroute the power for the puzzle. And so you're using Star-Lord's visor, which drops down, which then it tells you, points of interest, and you're on it recalibrating like, the nooks and crannies, the elbows and straight lines to move power around. And then you can send it off to a secret area, get into a room you didn't need, get more currency that you can then, use to upgrade your stuff when you get back to the ship, or probably buy other stuff as you go. You open the door, you go in, hooker crook, the Nova Corps shows up. And guess what? The Nova Corps isn't the Nova Corps. They're acting weird. There's been a few other, hints of what's going on here. If you've been paying attention to the story, of course, they're going up against, what is it? The Church of, I had it somewhere. Do you have it off the top of your head, Tim? You remember? Latter-day Saints? No. The Church of Truth is what we were looking for. Blessing.
I was close.
Well, I want to stop you there, Greg. Like that's something that I think is really cool about Guardians, is that it is such a different corner of the universe, like it being in space and all that. Even with the MCU, like it was such a breath of fresh air because it wasn't the things we're used to, and so many comic readers, like even hardcore people, weren't necessarily that familiar 100%. With Guardians, and now we are, obviously, with where we're at. Us playing Insomniac Spider-Man game, and I know that that's different in a lot of ways. It kind of worked at its best because we were so familiar with so many elements of it, but having Mr. Negative was kind of like a fresher thing to a lot of people, but it also just had good twists on the familiar. Whereas what I've seen about this game, and I'm kind of interested in, a lot of the enemies, a lot of the locations, a lot of the story elements seem to be very unfamiliar, things that I am not familiar with at all. When you're playing through, does it feel like there's consequence, or does it kind of feel like you're overwhelmed with stuff that you don't know and you're not interested in?
No, they do a great job of, again, and this is somebody who's getting dropped into the game in progress. I understood what the mission was. Even like they kept talking about Ko-Rel, right? We're here to find Ko-Rel. It's Quill's ex-girlfriend, right? And they're referencing, you wanted to kiss her when you saw her a second ago. Like clearly we just had a whole interaction with her where I guess she found us or whatever for it. And then there's Lady Hellbender, who's like the more larger villain, at least to this part of the story or whatever is going through. They do a good job of, at that point, dropping you and introducing characters, and I understood what was going on. And I think part of the power of that, Tim, is, as you talk about Insomniac Spider-Man, of course, being different and changing things, but being at its core Spider-Man story, and Peter, and MJ, and May, that is the same thing here. And I think that's the power of it, is that in the beginning, who the Guardians were as I was playing wasn't a turnoff, but it was like, oh, you're not this. Oh, you're not that. Oh, I don't know if you would have said that. But by the end, I didn't feel that. By the end, I had gone in and like, oh, this Gamora take is interesting. It's not dramatically different. You know who Gamora is, right? Oh, this Drax, obviously you find the Guardians in a different spot here, right? They were a bit more like, I don't know if we're going to be together after this mission. They're kind of having the, yelling, fighting in family moments, right? Or kind of thing. But Drax was still funny. I wrote down one, right, of like, yeah, big guy, 12 o'clock. The current time is irrelevant. Like, that's the line you'd expect in the Guardians movies, right? And I would expect in this game. It still got a laugh out of me. And so I think by having those touchstones and having them be very similar, but giving them room to change, and obviously as we spend, I'm going to guess, 8 to 10 hours with them. Who knows how long this game is? I'm not sure if that's on the record anywhere. You're going to see that evolve and change. And understand who they are in a different way and have them come into their own. And one of the things I found really powerful about that even was then when there's a whole bunch of different costumes for these characters that, some were already unlocked on this build we had. So I got to go in, for Peter and change him to put him into a Nova Corps specialized outfit. And, there's a whole bunch of other tiles there that were grayed out that are going to be available that you can get. Gamora, I went the opposite where I jumped into her stuff and they had the original outfit for her from Guardians of the Galaxy, the movie. And I put that on her and that felt more at home for me too. So it's this weird mix and match that I feel like you're making the Guardians your own as you go, let alone getting used to them in combat, let alone getting used to them in the story and where they're at, that I think is going to pay off and pay dividends in terms of making it for you. Now, will it ever ascend to be something as good as Spider-Man? I doubt it, but I enjoyed what I played. I'm sorry, Andy.
Are those cosmetics tied to any sort of abilities? Or are they just cosmetics?
Just cosmetics from what I saw. I jotted them down here that what they were, and I didn't see anything plus or minus on them. But again, I think it was like I had one for every character.
I also know you mentioned during that gameplay segment that your thumb was getting very sore, Craig, and I worry about your thumbs, man. I've always worried.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Is the shooting? Does it feel very active, or is it very just kind of auto aim? You look at that guy, you just hold down the button, and it just auto aims. Like, are there critical spots to aim for specifically that will net you a better outcome?
This is one of the things I was too underwater to fully wrap my head around. It's more of a point and shoot, and like you're talking, it's not accurate. You're not worried about clicking heads. You're just putting the reticle over there, and it's make sure you do it. What I'm not sure of is how much of that is minor distractionary damage, and then I'm really doing stuff with my special abilities, which would be the Guardians, or if that is actually doing anything. There was a couple different enemies that had like special shields up, and the only way to get through the shield was to use Quill's Ice Blast. So I definitely had to shoot them with the Ice Blast and then command the Guardians, or go in there and melee them myself and fight them that way. But even then, like, the combat is so, I don't want to say intense, but frantic and like moment to moment that even when I would go in there and start wailing away with my melee button, right? Eventually, not every time, but a lot of times it would pop up with like, the Y button or whatever for asking me for a reversal. And if I didn't do it, then I got punched in the face. And it was like, man, I can't take my eye off the ball. This is a very active game in terms of what's going on and what you're going through. Because again, once I got in the whole conversation of what I'm doing, when the Nova Corps shows up, they're not the Nova Corps. I get to choose a whole bunch of different dialogue responses again. Decide if we're are we standing our ground? Are we trying to run? What are we going to do? Obviously, it all leads to a battle no matter what. Then the game becomes, okay, cool, we're trying to get to point, C. So it is going from A and fighting a, room full of dudes, then advancing to the next area, fighting a room full of dudes to get over there. And there's some platforming and there's some, little light problem solving. Like, how do I get that down there so we can get over there? And how do I order the guys around? But that's the thrust of getting it there. Now, when I jumped into combat here, one of the things that spawned me to start moving quicker, right, was Blessing asked, was there anything that caught you off guard, right? There is this thing that they showed during the tutorial leading into it, right, called Huddle Up. And it's this idea that when the moment strikes, right, I forget which buttons you hit, but you call the Guardians around you, right, and you give them a pep talk. And when they show it in the like when you're not playing, you see it in a tutorial video, the game is third person action for everything, right? It goes first person. The Guardians walk up to you and there's this weird like purpley like screen behind them, like kind of like dreamy because you're talking in the middle of battle. So it's kind of like blocking everything out. And I remember looking at this and going like, this looks like garbage. Like, this does not look good. And I don't understand this. In battle, I fucking loved it so much because the idea is that it's basically a dice roll for powers, a power up. And so you call the huddle up, the Guardians come over, surround you, and then like it was, I think it was Drax or whoever, but it was Drax and Rocket going back and forth, and there was like lines of like, Peter's like, what's going on? We got to do this. And he's like, we're just not working as a team. And you see like behind them, like the word team kind of come up and fade or be there, but floating a bit. Oh yeah. We're not, I don't think we've been doing this long, or we're acting like, well, we haven't been doing this. We're not acting like the Guardians, blah, blah. And so then what happens is options come up for you as Peter to give a pep talk. And so you have to have listened to what they said. And again, this is not like taking notes. Their words are writing right behind them. Right. But it was the idea of like, inspiring them by talking about what a team you are, how long you've done this. You're the Guardians of the fucking galaxy kind of thing, right? Like, you've been doing this a long time. So I chose the right options, which then gives this like music swell gives everybody a buff. You're like, all right, let's go. And you run out and you have the Walkman, obviously. And since I nailed it, because you can do it what I did both times the options happened, right? Where I crushed it. And now we have a buff that like basically our supers weren't running out, so I could make the guys do their specials longer. There was no cooldown on what their actual moves were, or you could fuck it up or get it partially. Like if you, and I forget, there's a whole bunch of like different pros or cons based on what would happen. But I nail it. A song starts playing, one of the this giant licensed list of music, whatever, and you're running around and beating the hell out of everybody. And to this musical soundtrack, you're super powered. You're clearing out the room. You're doing all this stuff. And I was like, fuck, this is actually really cool. Like I thought this was going to be super lame when I'd seen it in the rundown before, right? But here it is actually being rad.
Are those moments few and far between, or do they happen enough?
I think it happens enough because obviously it's like a super move, so you have to build up to it. Like, and I forget what is actually filling in to get you there to make you go do it. But when you get there and it pops up to hit YB or whatever when you want to, that's when you get to go for it and you get to go off and actually get out there and fuck it up according to my notes. So yeah, I was happy with that. I like that a lot, and that was the surprise for me. And so like playing through, had a lot of fun, lots going on, lots to figure out. I think again in these combat scenarios when there are the purples and like it's also giving you like ratings on combos up here, so it's like magnificent and all this different stuff. Like there's a lot going on screen visually. It looks really cool. It looks really good. Again to that knee-jerk, is this demo gonna go bad? When it started and we were initially talking in the cockpit of the Milano, I thought like the space outside looked really dead. Like what I mean? It didn't look like I was in active space. It looked like we were parked in front of a JPEG or whatever. And I was like, oh, is this how this game's going to look? It didn't once we got moving and once things started happening and we were going. But there was that, again, knee-jerk reaction of like, oof, what am I about to get into?
I need to ask. We've talked about Spider-Man. We've talked about swimming in sevens. How does this compare to Avengers?
I mean, they're far different games, right? I mean, if you're talking about the quality of what I played in terms of, are you talking about like a number rating or whatever?
No. I'm just in terms of like what the game is, and in terms of like these are characters obviously we know from the exact same
like
property.
How does it differentiate enough?
Well, I mean, obviously, the entire gameplay structure. This is a better game based on this preview I've played. This is a better game than Avengers. Like, I don't know if that'll net out in the end. I played an hour of it. Who knows what happens here or there? But in the front, the beginning, does it get old? Yada, yada, yada. But like, this was a more satisfying experience than Avengers would be, right? Like, I think if you just want to take the Avengers campaign and compare it to this, I think that these characters felt more in line with what I would think and want out of the Avengers you saw before, performance-wise and what's going on. I think combat-wise, it's more interesting to go through and do it that way. Of course, you start getting into what Avengers becomes in its end game, and that's a different story in terms of what they are. But I think in terms of like quality level, I would think it's a better game than Avengers. Yeah.
In terms of combat,
honestly kind of shocked you're saying that.
In terms of combat, how does it feel? Like, would you compare it in terms of melee combat to how Avengers feels, where it is a little bit not off, but it does feel like more of a multiplayer game than something like Spider-Man, which feels like it's built to be this single player. You like the melee combat feels tight, sort of thing. Would you say that's more Avengers or more Spider-Man, or somewhere in between?
I see. I think it's its own thing because again, this is field general shit where it's not like. I don't think of when I'm thinking of what I did in there and the cool shit I did. It wasn't so much Peter Quill doing everything. It was Peter Quill commanding the team to do other things and run over there and attack that. And you feel the satisfaction because you're using them like special moves. Like they're part of your arsenal, right? If you were to think of it from a gameplay perspective, they're out there, they're attacking, they're at my beck and call in terms of what it is. They have cooldowns that, they can get in over their head. I had to go revive Drax a couple times and stuff like that when things really got hot and heavy. But it is this idea of them throwing a lot of enemies at you and then having you try to sort it out. And so, like one of the later parts of the mission when we're trying to escape was very much like, okay, cool. Like I kept failing at it because there were so many things going on and I would get KO'd and there'd be these snipers up there, but there'd be these things down there. So it was, okay, cool. Gamora, get up there, take those out on like your third try. I'm figuring this out. Gamora, get up there. A heavy drops Drax. I need you doing the pounce thing attack you do over there. Rocket, you're working on this. Then you start to feel it a little bit of like, okay, here's how I got to prioritize these enemies with these actual abilities or in this place characters.
Does it give you any Final Fantasy VII Remake vibes in terms of battle? Because that sounds like that and it looks like it to me.
I can see that. I think this feels more active than that. I felt like I was more about making sure everybody was doing their thing here than I was in Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy was a very specific, oh shit, I need Barrett to do this. I'm about to die. I need a heal. Let's get that out there kind of thing. Thank you very much. But this one was more like, correct me if maybe you don't feel the same way. For my recollection of Final Fantasy VII Remake, right? It was that I felt I was controlling, in quotes, those characters, but I felt that was more when I needed them, calling them in, if that makes sense. Whereas this one, I felt really like the gameplay feels like I was puppet master here, where it was more about what is going on with everybody. How close is Rocket to being back? Okay, he's up again. Let's send him out to do his thing. Okay, let's get Drax over there.
Yeah, I think the difference is in Final Fantasy VII, it was more about you switching between characters to play as, depending on where they were or what type of attacks you had to do. But like the thing that I'm getting the vibe of FF7 from this is the kind of flow state of the combat of you're constantly moving around and you're constantly attacking and having the different people do different things and you're shifting through where it starts to become kind of rhythmic through it all, as opposed to just being more kind of beat 'em up, shoot 'em up type action games, like something like in my experience with the Avengers.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I think there's more thought here in terms of what you need to do. And I mean, that's because you have to think about when you pull up Drax, what do you want? And like, because he can do this like ground pound and throw everybody up in the air, right? So if there's a bunch of people there, let's use that. And if it's just one person, then let's use one of his other moves that does X, Y, or Z.
I'm interested, man. I'm sold. I'm honestly happy that you're this high on it, even though you're not like glowing 10 out of 10. It's like, this is higher than I expected going in, especially you not having talked to me before this Gamescast. Because normally if something's like hot, you're like, oh shit, I needed to talk about it. But
and that's the thing about it is like, I feel like so many previews you come out of, or even, previews we'll talk about. This is a preview, right? You come out like, oof, not my game. Oh my God, I can't wait to play this. And this is this weird one where, again, I like it. I can't wait to play it, but I say I can't wait, and I'm using it in the very, loose throw around can't wait. Like when this game comes out to me, I'll be super excited to have it, but I'm not going to hound Square Enix for codes kind of thing. Like I'm excited. It looks fun. I want to get in there and really invest in the moves and, build out these characters and see, what you can do with them.
You guys have any final questions?
I was just going to say, I'm happy that you don't seem to put off by them not feeling like the Guardians that we know, and how you kind of get used to that pretty quickly. Yeah, I know that's a lot of people's initial worries, and I think we as a collective society of gamers are getting better at that, and a lot of that is due to honestly Insomniac. Really, like I still feel weird when I hear Troy Baker and Nolan North being the Avengers, and that was still kind of odd, but I feel like this universe might be sort of I don't know, like you're getting used to it quicker, and these characters feel like a different version of what we're used to.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to put it, right? Because I think they are the archetypes of who we know them to be, and I bet as we play, they get further away from that and become more of their own. And I think, the upgrade system's cool in terms of coming back with components. You go back to Rocket's Workbench, you look in there, do you want the rapid fire? Do you want a different kind of scan? Like, you can start to see where, obviously, by the end of it, you'll probably have everything. But in these moments where you can really double down to, okay, cool, well, this is what I want Peter doing on the field. I want my blasters to feel more powerful, so I'll start putting stuff in there.
And Rocket's saying a bunch of kooky stuff, huh?
What? Yeah, well, who is this raccoon, this knucklehead?
Is he still stealing body parts?
I didn't see that yet. Didn't see that. He was still just very upset that we were in Nova Core in general.
Before we move on, let me tell you about our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Are you using the internet without ExpressVPN? If so, why? That's like checking your baggage at the airport without a lock. You think your stuff is private, but you never know who's gonna go through your underwear, and we don't want that. When you go online without a VPN, your ISP can see all your internet activity, and they can legally sell it to people who use your data to target you. But ExpressVPN encrypts and anonymizes your data, so your ISP can't see your activity. It's super easy to use. Literally, you just click one button. I've been using it. It's been keeping me safe. I feel way better just knowing that people aren't able to go in there, see what I'm doing and all that stuff. It's just no. Why are we doing that? You don't need to. ExpressVPN, baby. It also works on your router, and it can protect anyone that uses your network. You can secure your online activity by visiting expressvpn.com/kindafunny today. That's expressvpn.com/kindafunny, and you'll get an extra 3 months free. expressvpn.com/kindafunny. Next up, shout out to Upstart. If you're carrying a credit card balance month after month after month, it can sometimes feel like you're in a never-ending cycle of debt. But Upstart can help you make the final payment and get back on track. Upstart is the fast and easy way to pay off your debt with a personal loan, all online, whether it's paying off credit cards, consolidating high-interest debt, or funding personal expenses. Over 500,000 people have used Upstart to get one fixed monthly payment. Upstart helped one of my really good friends consolidate all of his loans, so he didn't really have any more debt. It was simple, it was dealt with, and now he's debt-free. Upstart knows that you are more than just your credit score, and that's why they're expanding access to affordable credit. They consider your income and current employment to find you a smarter loan rate. With a 5-minute online rate check, you can see your rate upfront for loans between $1,000 to $50,000. Find out how Upstart can lower your monthly payments today when you go to upstart.com/kindafunny. That's upstart.com/kindafunny. Don't forget to use this URL to let them know that we sent you. Loan amounts will be determined based on your credit, income, and other certain information provided in your loan application. Go to upstart.com/kindafunny. And finally, shout out to DraftKings. The NFL season's gotten off to a great start, and it's only getting better at DraftKings, the official daily fantasy partner of the NFL. DraftKings is putting new customers in the center of the action with a free shot at millions of dollars in total prizes. Get in the action now. Just pick up your lineup, stay under the salary cap, and see how your team stacks up against the competition. And you can feel the NFL action like never before with a free shot at millions of dollars in total prizes. DraftKings is safe, it's secure, it's reliable, and download the DraftKings app now and use code KindaFunny. This week, new customers can get a free shot at millions of dollars in total prizes. Enter code KindaFunny to get a free shot at millions in total prizes with your first deposit. That's code KindaFunny, only at DraftKings, the official daily fantasy partner of the NFL. There's a $5 minimum deposit required. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for details with the code KindaFunny. And now that we're here, guys, I'm so excited to tell you about a little game called Cruis'n Blast.
Holy
This
shit.
video game, ladies and gentlemen, is, I can't say unlike anything you've experienced before, because it very much is like things you've experienced before. And those things are the late 90s at arcades. Okay. They have somehow distilled the just pure insanity of the arcade experience into a home console video game. Now, for those that are unfamiliar, the Cruis'n franchise dates back to the Nintendo 64. There's Cruis'n USA, Cruis'n World, Cruis'n Exotica that all came out, and they were mainly arcade games, but then were ported to N64. They were published by Nintendo, and it was a really big deal because this was back when N64 was next gen. Like, it was like that transition to 3D, and everyone was really excited to even be able to play a 3D game at home. And the biggest lie ever put out there was that the N64 was going to be using the same kind of architecture as the arcade machine. So everybody would flock to these arcades to get a taste of what the N64 might be like with the original Cruis'n USA. And when Cruis'n USA came out on the N64 as not a launch title, but shortly after, it kind of became one of those, either you owned this game or you knew somebody that had this game. Like, it's just like kind of ubiquitous, I meant to say, with having access to a Nintendo 64. Andy, were you about to say something?
No, I was just going to ask, like, and when you played it at the arcade, you always felt a little dirty when, like, the cute girl would walk up and kind of like wave the flag, and you're like, oh, I hope my dad doesn't see me looking at this.
Very 90s game, extremely 90s game. Yeah. When you would beat it, you would end up in a hot tub with bikini clad girls. With
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. Holy shit!
Hot coffee mod.
And the Bill Clinton part was probably the weirdest thing of all that.
Well, holy shit!
Did he voice act in it?
No, it was just a shitty digital version of him kind of like waving. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. They got rid of all that stuff in this. You would not be seeing any of that. But what's cool about Cruis'n Blast is this is the first home release for a cruising game in many, many years. Going back a little bit more into the history of this company, they made the games on N64. They kept making the arcade games. Anytime you've been to an arcade in the last 30 years, one of these games is going to be there. And what happened is after the cruising games, they got the license to drive,
To kill.
but also the
Ah.
license of the Fast and the Furious. So anytime you've been at an arcade and you see that Tokyo Drift game or any of the Fast and Furious arcade games, it's just this. It's the Cruis'n engine. And they've just been kind of like refining it over time to just be that pure kind of quarter munching action that you expect from an arcade game of just trying to get you to play one more time, to have that much more fun. We're going to throw everything at you. It's going to be pure insanity. So even if you're not actually sitting playing, you're just arcade goer watching it. It's crazy insanity and it's fun to be a part of it, right? I have had excuse my pun here, blast with this game. It is so much more than it should have been, but also it is like, I can't say that this is a great video game because it's not, but it commits so hard to that just 90s arcade insanity of like, it might be the tackiest looking thing I've ever
looks like
seen.
shit. Like
It looks like shit, but it's like, but that's kind of the point, right? It is kind of like, they're like all caps gamer 90s like insanity of like every color's not supposed to go together. It's just supposed to be fucking loud. But the gameplay backs that up. It backs up the fun of how ridiculous this all is, where you'll be going on these courses super fucking fast. It controls way more like a Mario Kart than it controls like even a Need for
Like a
Speed.
Forza.
Like yeah, definitely not that.
the water shaders and what we've been seeing so far, like everything visually looks like, hey, Android just came out with their first tablet and it's the year 2010.
God.
Like we're
Yeah.
taking on the iPad and here's like the game, here's the visuals you can come to expect on mobile.
I kind of dig it though. I kind of dig it for just the nostalgia aspect of it because I'm somebody who loved to play Cruis'n USA back on the N64, and I think there's something about the blocky and like super colorful nature of that generation of games that isn't replicated as much because it does look ugly in a lot of cases, whereas you see a lot of Super Nintendo 16-bit style retro graphics replicated a lot nowadays because that's something that, you know, that was kind of the peak of that era, and it's easy to go back to that and have that be something that shines. And so like in a weird way, this reminds me of Killer Queen, which was also arcade, but took arcade for like that type of style and brought it forward, where this is doing the same thing but for like N64 era arcade, even though I know those are two different things.
No, totally. And I think that's to be serious about this for a second. Like, I really think that this game is not just a N64 throwback. It looks like that in our minds in a lot of ways, but this is actually kind of us being able to at home play what arcades have been improving on over the last 2 decades in a way that we just don't get to experience because home games are made differently than that. So there is this inherent one more match type loop that they hook in you that like every time I have like 10 minutes, I've just been popping on just to like get a little bit more, unlock another paint job or get another car. It's like there's enough fun, ridiculous shit because as you can see in a lot of the footage we're watching, it's a pretty basic course you're on. But then all of a sudden the map you're on will crack open in the middle and you fall down a thing and giant zebras are coming out and there's zebra dinosaurs and you're just like, what the fucking hell is happening? But it's like, it is just a pure racing game. There's a drift mechanic where there is skill involved in what you're doing, but it's kind of just hurtling you forward. And it's like, how are you going to deal with this insanity going on around you? And there's always like, there's things to collect. There's like keys. So like it's incentivizing you to kind of explore the map and find shortcuts and stuff. And like, it's one of those brilliant gimmicks that I have not experienced in a console video game in maybe ever, where I'm like, holy shit, I am getting an arcade experience, that thrill of trying to get just a little farther, trying to get just a little more. But like, yeah, thank you, Eric, for bringing this up. Like, what the fuck? There's like just a phoenix flying around in this ice castle.
Is this the Yeti?
That's the one with the Yeti that was going around on Twitter.
But it's like, yeah, that giant Yeti arm. Like, these moments are not like, oh shit, like this is
awesome.
Like, this isn't spoiling anything because if you play this game, every single time you play, something's gonna happen that makes you go, what the fuck?
I love the idea of somebody watching this being like, oh, spoilers.
God damn, I didn't
exactly,
want to know about the Yeti. Now,
Bless, you had your
this-
hand raised. What's up?
Yeah, this is gonna be a dumb question, but like, you are racing in this game. Like, these are races that I'm watching on
Yes.
screen because you mentioned exploring the map, you mentioned collecting keys, and like as I'm watching the footage right here, it looks very chaotic. And I wouldn't be surprised if like the next sentence you said was like, "This is a roguelite that just has driving in it." Is it traditional racing as we understand it from the Cruis'n franchise?
That is all that it is. It is just get to the end. It's not even laps. It's literally just one course. It's kind of similar to the Wario level in Mario Kart 8, where it's kind of like you're going down the mountain the entire time. So it's like there are 3 like levels of laps you're doing, but you're never actually lapping. It's always like new content that you're going through. And as you can see in like upper right corner here, like 4th out of 10, like it is just a traditional race. And that's it. But when I say exploring, it's like it is more the shortcuts of going left instead of right on the jump, or a blimp will be flying over you with a little key attached, and you're like, oh fuck, there's a jump over there that I need to get off at the right time to.
It's like Diddy Kong Racing, where like at a certain point you're collecting the silver coins in Diddy Kong Racing as opposed to just pure racing.
It's like that, but there's no open world at all. Like there's no like it is literally just.
For sure.
Race, and like there's not that many levels, but there's a lot of remixes of the levels. There's a surprising amount of content in this game, but also not enough content. Like it's $40. That's insane. If this was $20, I would recommend it to everybody. $40 is more like
that's crazy.
It's fucking crazy. And I did not get a code for this. I bought this video game. I bought Cruis'n Blast because I've been a Cruis'n fan for a long time. And if everything you just saw and what I'm saying speaks to you at all, if you're like, I think I might have some fun with it, you're going to have some fun with this. If you look at this and like, that looks like a fucking trash fire I want no part of, you're probably right. You're probably right. This isn't for everybody, but it is definitely it's a blast, guys.
Hey, I want to try it. You sold me.
Yeah. Bless, I think you're going to vibe with it. Episode 1 racer vibes, for sure. For sure. God.
That's all
I
need
music to his ears. Music
to his ears. Like
it looks like coming Burnout too.
We're coming up on being several weeks away or a month away. I don't know when the Hot Wheels game comes out. That's the one that I'm
a week away.
A week?
Yeah.
Holy shit. Okay, I'm really excited then.
Yeah. It's a good time
for Friday.
Fun racers. Moving on. I'm really, really excited, Bless, to hear about Deltarune Chapter 2.
Oh my god. So Deltarune, for people who don't know, people probably know Undertale because Undertale is like the biggest indie game since Sliced Bread that came out in 2015 and was this RPG.
I Am Bread.
Now it is called I Am Bread. That was basically an indie RPG styled a little bit like Earthbound, a little bit like old school 16-bit JRPGs. But like that came out and was a phenomenon. People love it, all this stuff. Deltarune Chapter 1 came out a few years ago. And what that was like a rearranged version of Undertale where like you would have similar characters. It had a similar world, but things were off and different.
It's an anagram.
It's an anagram. Yeah. If you rearrange the letters of Deltarune, it eventually spells Undertale. Yeah. And basically like Deltarune is an interesting thing because Toby Fox released Chapter 1. And basically what that was kind of a demo for the rest of the Deltarune release that he was continually working on, while at the same time being literally the Chapter 1 of the story. He pretty much surprise released Chapter 2 last week out of nowhere, or I guess with like a 2 days notice. And it's an interesting thing because like in his blog before where he released Chapter 1, he released this Chapter 1 and was like, cool, I'm going to work on the rest of the game and you guys will get it when you get it. But his methodology behind Chapter 2 essentially was like, hey, like it's taken me a long time. I'm just gonna release Chapter 2 for you guys. Have fun with it. Go crazy. And the game, I finished it over the weekend, and it is a blast. Like, I want to hear what Barrett has to say about it first, because like it's one of those ones where I don't know where to jump into it because I feel like I can spoil it so easily.
I know it's rough to talk about it without like getting into specifics. First of all, with like how this game is being released, right? Because when Chapter 1 like kind of shadow dropped, and it wasn't even like when it shadow dropped, we didn't even know if it was a game or not. It was like you downloaded a survey program, and then it like you opened it up, and it was asking you your name and like what you think about like and like having you ask questions, and you're like, all right, like what is this? And then at the end, it's like, all right, build this character. Never mind, this is the character that we're telling you, and things like that. And it seems like what Toby Fox wants to do with Deltarune is kind of flip Undertale on its head, with like, obviously with the anagram stuff, but also with like the familiar characters that we see from and love from Undertale, and seeing like where the relationships are and how everything is different. And there are some characters who are best friends in Undertale who don't even know each other in Deltarune.
Yeah,
and it was like this whole this whole mystery when Chapter 1 came out. Like,
yeah,
is
it's
this
like
a
it's
sequel?
like if,
Is it a prequel? Is it even related to the original game? And there's like all of these questions that were being like built up while playing Chapter 1, but at the same time delivering this really fun adventure game where these kids from these kind of outcasts from school go into this fantasy world. And in Chapter 1, the fantasy world that they go to is like kind of like almost Alice in Wonderland, like deck of cards themed. Like like the big bad is like this the King of Spades, and
who's the Pomeranian?
The dog is
Susie. Or are you talking about Toriel? Or wait, is this
the little white Pomeranian?
The little white dog? There's a theory that's Toby Fox himself.
Yeah, that is Toby Fox.
When I asked that question, I expected a name. Didn't expect Susie, and I definitely did not expect you to say there's a theory that's the creator. Okay.
I mean,
okay, cool.
but that's a lot of like what Undertale and Deltarune is, and I know this is very complicated to talk about if you don't understand like what these games are. A lot of the theories around this game is that they're kind of meta commentaries on game development themselves. So yeah, there's definitely places where it seems like Toby Fox might be the dog character that like comes in and like messes things up every once in a while. But essentially for those to go back and simplify it, like I
want to give a comparison for Barrett, because I think Barrett touched on explaining it pretty well, where like I feel like it's kind of like if Naughty Dog was like, cool, we're gonna put out a sequel to The Last of Us, but we're gonna call it Us of Last, and Ellie doesn't know Joel for some reason, and like is it a prequel, is it a sequel, we don't know, and like all the characters are the same characters, but like they have different jobs now, right? It's kind of like that. And yeah, like to the premise of it, you're playing as a character named Chris, who is a new character to the series. You go into, and this is for Chapter 1, right? You go into the classroom to like hang out in class and go to school and all this stuff. You meet Susie, who's like more of a scary kind of antagonist character, but also like good, like the anti-hero kind of character. You jump into like this mystical world, and then like you have to kind of solve whatever, like you basically have to bring life to this world that has been consumed by darkness. And that is Chapter 1. Chapter 2 has pretty much the same exact premise, where it picks up from where Chapter 1 left off, and you go back and you find another dark world, and you jump into that one. And it is a very similar story playing out, but you have like a new baddie named Queen, who is like this big, Barrett, how do you describe him? Like a big robot creature?
Yeah, she's like hold on, I'm trying to find footage of her. She seems to be like almost she's very similar to the King of Spades from the first chapter. She looks kind of like an equivalent to the Queen of Spades almost. And yeah, she's like this weird Mimi robot ruler who's trying to turn the world of dark, expand it essentially to take over the world. And as the protagonists and the heroes, you have to go off and stop them and go throughout this journey in their specific world to stop them. And again, there's so much. It's hard to talk about this game, and I don't know where to go with it.
I think the things I want to say about it is, one, I think Deltarune Chapter 2 does a really good job of really like re-cementing that Toby Fox is really good with writing and really good with humor. I think this is the funniest game he's put out yet. And like I say game, even though I know like we're talking about it in terms of chapters, because these releases do feel like full games at this point. Like Chapter 1 was 4 to 5 hours, which could be, I guess, comparable to the playthrough of Undertale. Deltarune Chapter 2, I'd also say, has a similar length, and they have full story arcs, right? Mm-hmm. Like you're meeting characters, you are wrapping up a full story, and the chapters feel less like Life is Strange chapters and really do feel more so like, no, this is a whole episode.
They feel like books. Like I was when I wrapped up Deltarune Chapter 2 on I think it was Sunday night. I stayed up late trying to beat it over the weekend. And like when we get to the cliffhanger of Chapter 2 and kind of like following up on like what the cliffhanger from Chapter 1 was, and seeing that wrap up, but then you're going to get more in the, Chapter 3, and like those threads are going to continue, but at the same time you're getting like this kind of like like this singular story in the middle of it, where we're going to this like dark world that's based off of like internet and memes and all that stuff, and that had its own story that felt like it wrapped up. So it's interesting of like with the release of Deltarune, like I'm almost thinking of Deltarune less as a singular game, but more of its own game series in a weird way.
It feels like it feels like its own franchise with now its own iterations. And like the thing is, the next iteration of Deltarune is supposed to be chapters 3 through 5 dropping all at once, and who knows when we get that. It might be another 2 years, since it took 2 years for us to get chapter 2. But like going back and talking about chapter 2, right? Like the humor is something that I think is really good and so quick. It feels like moment to moment there is always a joke that is hitting you, and I found myself laughing out loud at this game more than pretty much any other game that I played in the past.
Yeah.
Like it's including the Undertale and Deltarune Chapter 1. There's something about how he's refined his writing to now it feels like every moment while playing through Deltarune Chapter 2 feels like a moment in itself, where there's some punchline, there's always some piece of writing leading into a bit with the next gameplay mechanic. Like the game is styled and it is structured like a 16-bit JRPG, where it's top down, you're going through the world and you're talking to characters. But even within that, there's always something that it's structured like that. It is not paced like that. There's always something in every single moment to carry you forward to the next thing. And even in combat, like combat is a thing that people talk about with Undertale, because it is a turn-based JRPG system mixed with bullet hell mechanics and mixed with like puzzle solving too, because you have the choice in this game to either spare or kill enemies, and most of the time people are going to go for the spare option, because one, in Undertale you have different endings based on that, but in Deltarune Chapter 2 they introduced recruiting enemies, which if you spare enough of the same type of enemy enough times, you then can recruit them to be a part of your village back home. And so you're building kind of like an Animal Crossing community based off of enemies you're meeting in the world. And that does two things. One, it gives you a different element of like, cool, I'm not just fighting, I'm trying to solve what exactly I'm doing from fight to fight in order to recruit this character. But then also, it makes every single enemy you meet in the game their own character in a very interesting way, where, you know, like there's these characters that Barrett has pulled up on screen. These are the Swatchlings. And if you spare, I'll give a random number. If you spare 4 of them, they go back to your town and you can talk to them, and they're kind of like their own character with their own personality and their own bit. There's also like another one that's like a mouse character that you meet in the game. Like the whole bit with the mice is that like they really like cheese, and so like they have fun bits and fun puzzles built around.
You're telling me
like,
these mice like cheese?
I was gonna say, bless.
Oh my
That's
God,
not a
mice
bit.
love
That's
cheese.
a real thing. That's.
I mean, I guess that is a real thing.
Yeah.
But
This
like,
dude was original.
But
Jesus Christ.
there's like a joke that's built into the game. and
Obi
stuff
Fox
like
just ripping off Encyclopedia Britannica over here. You know what I
ripping
mean?
off Tom and
There's
Jerry.
this one puzzle you have to figure out what the Halloween colors are. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. But like there's always some kind of bit attached to like each of the enemies and each of the characters, and like the way in which they take each enemy and kind of turn them into their own character that you're revisiting and kind of understanding more and more about the enemies or the Swatchlings or the mice or whoever, like the boss enemies, as you go. I think is, again, very refined in this game in a way where I'm like, I can't believe that somehow he finds ways to actually improve his games, because Undertale is a game that I adored for what it was, right? Like it is an indie game. It has its own humor, it has its own vibe, it has its own thing that it goes for, and it has a lot of heart and charm, which is why I think most people love Undertale so much. Deltarune takes so many of those aspects and actually find ways to go, cool, how can we make the writing tighter? Cool, how can we make these, how can we build out this world? Okay, how can we turn this into an epic? Which at this point it feels like it's going to turn into an epic, because again, Undertale was what, 6 to 7 hours. Yeah. Deltarune Chapter 1 was like 5 hours. Deltarune Chapter 2 is another 5 hours. By the time we get to episode 7, this shit is going to be 35 hours to 40 hours, and maybe more if you want to recruit every single character in this thing. And the fact that he went from going from a smaller scale indie game that was a hit for so many people and a cult classic that took over the world, to now making something that feels like it is going to be this grand RPG that, to me, has some of the most, like some of the tightest and also funniest and also down to earth writing and humor in it, blows me away. And like Deltarune Chapter 2 again blew me away in it. And I know like for Tim, Greg, and Andy, who probably aren't like too clued into like what the fuck is any of this, I know it probably sounds like gibberish and sounds like ridiculousness, but I mean, finishing Deltarune Chapter 2 over the weekend, I was blown away. I had a really good time with it.
Yeah, and
I'm totally aware of the cult fan base that it has, and I will never forget being at the 2015 South by Southwest Awards when Game Over Greggy is visiting Austin, Texas, and I'm there at the awards show to see him accept this award. And anytime this fucking game was mentioned, a weird portion of the audience would pop for it, and you could tell it was all the kids that were really into Adventure Time and Steven Universe and Homestuck, the online kind of visual novel. I was like, I don't know what this game is. I don't know what the hell Undertale is, but anytime they show this, people are absolutely losing their shit over it. And every time you hear it, like, what the fuck is this game?
The soundtrack is so good.
The soundtrack for Deltarune Chapter 2 is on another fucking level, and something that I was not expecting. And to what Blessing was talking about, of like, I'm impressed with like each release of like how well he's able to refine his craft with with like storytelling, jokes, and like the wholesomeness, the charming characters. The also like specifically with this chapter of like, you know, for Deltarune, he talked about like he doesn't think he'll ever be able to recreate what Undertale gave to a lot of people, but he wants to try something else. And I think in Chapter 2 we're starting to see like the other thing that he's going to try with this game, and even getting a hint of that, I was like, this is going to be something special when we eventually get this full story. But then the soundtrack was insane, and like the final the final boss fight in this game, and like how like it kind of harkens back to like the beginning part where you first meet the queen, and then, you know, like how it all ramps up. It's phenomenal, and I think Toby Fox and crew were really on.
It kind of reminds me. It reminds me a little bit of Arrested Development in some of the humor, where like the final boss fight is like a random joke that was thrown away in Chapter 1, where that made me laugh, right? Where you get to it, and it was like, here's this random joke they throw in. By the time you get to the end of Chapter 2, they find a way to rope that back in a way where, you know, throughout the games, they do a good job of revisiting jokes and revisiting bits in a way that does remind me a lot of something like Arrested Development, which is a reference that I didn't think I'd make, but the more I think about it, the more I think it makes sense. And it's funny, like Andy mentions like the Homestuck and like I think you said Adventure Time, or like some of those Cartoon Network shows that people really have those connections with. I'm a person that doesn't really it's not that I don't care for that stuff, but I've never really found myself to be a fan of that stuff. Yeah, like I'm
but
not.
I do think it's an apt comparison, because there is in that like those singular episodes, like I can really only speak to Adventure Time, where it is like an adventure of the week, and there's like it's always like funny bits, but then there is like this kind of like overarching narrative that is happening that they're trying to tell.
It's always like really emotional and also just super random. This is so rando, you know,
random.
But I also, I mean, for me to say I'm not that guy, right? That's more so to say that I think there is something in Undertale / Deltarune that is like I think is interesting for people who are coming into this as a video game and wants to play it as a JRPG or just as an RPG, because I know technically it's not a JRPG. I think there in the way that the writing comes together, in the way that the world building comes together. Again, it's not like, and I mentioned this on either KFGD or some other show, that it's not like it doesn't have the presentation of like The Last of Us, or like there's not like one thing that Undertale or Deltarune do that makes me go, oh shit, like this is gonna be a hit with anybody, right? Like people need to come and experience this. But the way that the sum of its parts come together, from like the soundtrack, which is the thing I would say is like fucking phenomenal. Lena Raine, who did the Celeste soundtrack, also worked with Toby Fox on this soundtrack in particular for Chapter 2. The soundtrack is phenomenal, and it is probably the shining like, hey, you should play this for the soundtrack. But I think in terms of just what the game is, I think there's something about it structurally that just feels different, off, and unique from pretty much any other JRPG you're going to play. Like even in Earthbound, which Earthbound I think was the reason why I picked this up, because I heard those comparisons back in 2015 when I started to hear about Undertale. I was like, oh shit, I love Earthbound. Let me try out Undertale. And what Undertale was something that, you know, I'll compare to Earthbound in terms of the quirkiness of it, but it's also very different from Earthbound and anything else that I played in terms of how it actually pans out, what you're doing moment to moment, like what the spare versus kill system does, what the bullet hell mechanics and how that changes from enemy to enemy, and how creative that shit is. Like, I think there's so much there that you can appreciate just like as a video game fan, that I would recommend anybody like, yo, check out Undertale and play Deltarune, because like I think I think it might be a must play video game at this point. Like,
yeah,
it
100%. And
it blows me away to go back into it and
I
still
would
enjoy it
recommend
much.
for new people to check out Undertale first and then get into Deltarune, because then you're going to get into the more meta stuff where one of the big things with Undertale was like either killing everybody or sparing everybody, and like how you had like kind of actions in the world that affected the story. And it's interesting of how, again, with like the whole like otherworldly stuff where there's like characters that are from Undertale, but like they're different in Deltarune for some reason. The whole anagram thing. They're Toby Fox has been specific on like you will have choices to make, but it's all going to lead to one specific ending. And I think it's interesting of like how they're flipping that on your head of this kind of meta thing where you can't even though you're controlling the main character Chris, you are not Chris. And there's like this whole kind of like deeper level to what you're in control of when it comes to video games that I think is endlessly fascinating. And that's what like the kind of the cliffhangers that like chapter 1 and chapter 2 both have are like leaning into a lot of like, are you actually in control of this character that you're playing as, which is very different from what Undertale was. Like you were that character and you were making those relationships, but are you the one actually making the relationships with these people, and what are your influences? And I do think getting into the weeds a little bit, specifically with Blessing, like we haven't already gotten to the weeds already. The one thing that's interesting is that even though all paths that we take throughout these chapters will lead to one specific ending, we're being told a very specific story. Like there is still technically a genocide route that I saw people checking out throughout.
Video game.
Can you explain what that is?
Yes. So with enemy fights and stuff like that, like I'll show this up right here. Like we're fighting these like jukebox inspired characters, and we have the option to either attack them and take down their health, or we can go into a different route, which is act. And when you act, you have like different options of like, okay, to like maybe settle the tension, like settle down the tension, right? And to get them, maybe the enemies on your side. For the jukebox guys, maybe dance a little bit and get them all to dance, and like then you become friends instead of like fighting them and taking down their health and killing them. And that was a major component to Undertale, which was like you had that kind of same component in Undertale where you could choose to kill the enemies you were fighting, or choose to like act and befriend them in the middle of fights and settle the fight in a more non-aggressive manner. And that did affect kind of major components in the later part of Undertale. And the thing that's fascinating, and with specifically with Undertale, there's the pacifist run where you choose not to kill anybody. That gives a very specific ending. There's the genocide run that also gives a very different ending where you kill everybody throughout the game, and has a major effect. The thing that I find fascinating with this one is that Toby Fox has said like all roads are going to lead to the same place, but we still have that option to either befriend everybody, and if we recruit enough of the same type of enemy, like Blessing was saying, they can come back to our village. But then I started looking up, like I didn't know that there was a genocide route in Deltarune. I just assumed that, all right, well, like whatever. And seeing like how different moments were played out with things that are happening, I think it's very fascinating that we're being told a very specific story. And I think the way that it's going to be different for Deltarune than it was for Undertale, besides that, is that the different routes we take are going to affect the way we feel about certain characters by the end of it, even though it will be overall the same kind of narrative that is being told to us. Again, there's a lot of meta stuff going on, and I think it's a lot of great commentary on video game development, on honestly trauma, with what's going on with the main character Chris, and how they are dealing with a lot of real life things when it comes to separation of family, broken families, and stuff like that, and what kind of they're doing to deal with that in the aftermath, not having their older brother around and all of these things. And those are like little tidbits that are thrown around here and there that I think are going to be big influencers in like what this story ends up turning out to be by chapter 7.
It's a very good video game.
It's fascinating and it's very complex and it's very weird, but it's also very charming. And I think it's
also very fun.
Yes.
Like you also don't need to interact with like the complex natures of it. Because for me, when I play Undertale, and when I've played Deltarune's Chapter 1 and 2, like coming off of Chapter 2, the way I played it, which is the way I think 90% of people are going to play it, is I want to spare everybody. I don't want to kill anybody. I want to figure out how to spare everybody because I think that is the more fun way to play the game. Because that turns it into less of this pure combat thing and turns it more into like this cool, let's solve a puzzle, or let's figure out what the bit with this character is, or let's figure out what this character's deal is. And I think that's such a fun way to do it. And like, you know, like there are some like teases of like, oh, what is the deeper thing at play here, what is this character really alluding to? But for the way that I interact with Deltarune, I'm very much like, nah, give me the base story and I'll let YouTube tell me the rest after I'm done. You know, like give me the good stuff. I just want to I want to hang out with these characters. I want to see through the story. I want to beat this boss. I want to do this shit. And then like, you know, for me, I interact with it on the top level. And then afterwards I go on YouTube and I watch like Matt Pat or whoever. And I'm like, oh, cool. I didn't realize that thing. And then that for me, that is the way that I think so many people play, and I think there's levels to how much you can interact with it. For people who like might hear me and Bear talk about it and go,
yeah,
oh, that sounds like a lot. It's really not a lot. Like,
and again, that's what I was trying to say with like the, you know, like there is this like meta narrative, but in like the specific chapters, there are these like very straightforward, like you're going to an adventure land and there's a bad guy and you have to go take him down and you make friends along the way kind of thing. And I think there is a very easy level of entry to get into these worlds, and then it's really up to you if you want to get as deep into it as I and other have, or if you just want to like just enjoy the characters and enjoy the story and don't think about it when you're done wrapping up. I think it's a universe, and I think they are games that are worth spending time on and being charmed by.
Let us know in the comments below what you think about this, how deep you want to get into it, and more importantly, if you have any information on this annoying dog. Try doing some Googling. People do think it seems to be Toby Fox. That's interesting to me. Is it in Deltarune? I don't know, but I'm a big fan of it. If you're a big fan, let us know in the comments below. Let us know what you're thinking about Cruis'n Blast. If you're excited for Guardians of the Galaxy and anything else, we're about to do the Patreon exclusive post show where we're doing a special episode of Bless Who. Why is it special? Because I said so. We're gonna have a good time.
It is special, actually.
Oh yeah? Ooh,
yeah.
Want to give a little tease?
Why.
Want to give a tease to the people, or should we save it for the post show?
No, I'll save it because I don't want to give it away. I'll give it away out afterwards. You'll figure it out.
That's all you need to know, people.
You'll figure it out as we're playing.
Before the next episode, though, Tim, this time next week we'll have played the second Halo Infinite flight, and that's all that matters right now.
That is all that matters, Andy. I can't freaking wait. Let's go. But until then, love you all. Goodbye.